There's a train that vanishes into a hillside near Folkestone, on the south coast of England, and a few minutes later, it's under the sea. Most people picture what happens next as a simple thing. A straight tube, drawn like a ruler line between England and France, the shortest possible hop across the water. It feels obvious. Two coasts, one line, connect the dots. But that's not what's down there. If you look at an actual cross-section of the Channel Tunnel, the thing doesn't go straight at all. It curves sideways, it dips and rises, it wiggles its way under the seabed like it's trying to avoid something, and here's the part that should stop you. This is one of the most precisely engineered structures ever built. The wiggle isn't sloppiness. The wiggle is the whole secret. So why would the people who built the most accurate tunnel in history deliberately refuse to go in a straight line? Start by throwing out the assumption almost everyone makes. The hard part of the Channel Tunnel was not digging a really long hole. And the route was not chosen because it was the shortest. The narrowest crossing between England and France is about 21 miles, and you might assume that's where they'd punch through. They didn't take the simple straight shot. Because the thing that decides where you can build a tunnel under the sea isn't the distance across the top of the water. It's what's inside the rock underneath. Here's the trap your intuition falls into. When you think of this part of the world, you probably picture the white cliffs of Dover, that bright wall of solid chalk. So you imagine boring straight through more of the same, clean, white, simple. But most of that chalk would have been a disaster to tunnel through. Chalk up there is cracked, fractured, and soaked. It's full of fissures that let seawater pour straight in. Drill into the wrong layer under the channel, and you're not building a tunnel, you're opening a tap to the sea. So the real job was never cross the water. The real job was this. Find one specific layer of rock with exactly the right personality and then stay inside it the entire way across. Picture the seabed of the English Channel not as solid stone but as a stack of pancakes, layer after layer of different sedimentary rock, each with its own texture, laid down over millions of years. Most of those layers are wrong for tunneling. Too hard, too crumbly, too leaky. But one band in the middle of the stack is just right. It's called chalk marl, sometimes marley chalk, and it's a strange in-between material, chalk mixed with clay. The chalk makes it soft enough to bore through quickly. The clay makes it sticky and nearly waterproof, sealing out the sea. Soft enough to dig fast, tight enough to stay dry. There is essentially one Goldilocks layer beneath the channel, and the entire tunnel had to live inside it. But here's the problem. That perfect layer isn't a flat shelf. It tilts, it folds, it rises and sinks as it crosses from France to England. So the tunnel can't go straight because the layer it depends on doesn't go straight. Every curve, every dip, every gentle climb you see in that cross-section is the tunnel faithfully following its pancake as it bends through the earth. Now you can see why just go straight would have failed. A straight, level line would have started inside the good rock and then sliced right out of it, up into the fractured, water-bearing chalk above, or down into faulted, broken ground. The moment you leave the chalk marl, you're fighting floods and collapse. And on the French side, the same friendly layer turns moody. Over there it's folded and cracked and far wetter, so much so that the British and French had to use different machines. The French side needed sealed-face boring machines, called earth pressure balance machines, built to hold back high-pressure water at the cutting face, while the drier British side could bore faster through cleaner rock. And there was something else lurking down there to avoid. A buried valley called the Fosse d'Angers. A deep scar gouged into the rock long ago and then filled with loose sand and gravel. Bore into that, and you're not cutting rock anymore. You're digging through waterlogged rubble under the weight of the sea. So the route had to swerve around it too. Which leaves the real question. If you have to stay locked inside a thin, tilting, invisible layer of rock, a layer you cannot see, buried under hundreds of feet of seabed and water, how on earth do you follow it? This is the genuinely elegant part. Underneath the chalk marl sits an even thinner band, just 1 to 2 meters thick, called the glauconitic marl. It's not much to look at, but it has a gift. It shows up with a sharp, distinct signature on seismic surveys, the sound wave scans engineers use to map the seabed. That thin band could be traced clear across the entire channel, like a single colored stripe running through a layer cake. So that's what they did. They found the stripe, mapped it end to end with hundreds of boreholes and seismic scans, and then kept the tunnel a fixed distance above it the whole way. Lasers guided each boring machine along that planned, curving path, holding it on the seam. The wiggle, in other words, is the tunnel tracing a stripe of rock laid down before humans existed. Now layer one more thing on top of that. They weren't doing this from a single direction. Two sets of machines launched from opposite coasts, one from England, one from France, and bored toward each other for roughly 23 miles under the sea, each following the seam blind, aiming to meet in the middle. Think about how absurd that is. Two drills, started in two different countries, threading the same invisible layer of rock from opposite ends, hoping to shake hands somewhere beneath the waves. When they finally met, the alignment was off by just 358 millimeters sideways and 58 millimeters vertically. That's a few hundred millimeters of error after tunneling toward each other for over 20 miles. Less than the width of a doorway, across a distance like walking from one city to the next entirely underground. And the rock had been keeping a secret. As the modern machines dug, they ran straight into an older tunnel, a heading bored back in 1882, more than a century earlier, in a Victorian attempt to cross the channel that was abandoned. When the modern crew broke into it, they found it still watertight after 100 years, the old rails and handcart still sitting where the workers had left them. That same seam of chalk marl had been quietly tunnel-friendly for over a century. People had simply given up before the technology caught up to the rock. There's even a deeper irony buried in that swerve around the Fosse d'Angers. That buried valley was most likely carved by catastrophic ancient megafloods, colossal surges of water that in the deep past helped tear Britain away from mainland Europe and turn it into an island. So the very scars left behind when water split the land are the obstacles the tunnel had to dodge in order to join the land back together. The flood broke the bridge. Engineers threaded a needle around its wreckage to rebuild it. So here's what the Channel Tunnel really is. It isn't a line drawn between two countries. It's a line drawn around the rock, a path that obeys the geology instead of fighting it. Every bend down there is the Earth making a decision and the engineers agreeing to follow. The hardest thing they did wasn't summoning brute force. 11 boring machines weighing more than the Eiffel Tower had force to spare, and one was so big they couldn't get it back out, so they simply steered it sideways and buried it in the seabed forever. The truly hard thing was discipline, staying inside an invisible stripe of soft rock every meter for over 20 miles beneath a sea actively trying to get in. So the next time you watch a train slip quietly into that hillside near Folkestone and disappear under the water, remember what it's actually doing. It isn't dropping into a straight pipe. It's sliding onto a gentle, deliberate curve, hugging a seam of rock that was laid down something like 95 million years ago. The engineers didn't conquer the channel, they read it, and once you've seen the wiggle, you can never quite unsee it.